Hi everyone, this is Elisa here, and today we're going to be getting into the CDC moratorium in our Easy RE advice. We're going to look at who it's impacted for, what is the penalty, and how that's helping or not helping landlords and tenant in terms of what it actually impacts it. It's been here for about a month, and we're going to share some of its impact to our portfolio across the board in Washington, Texas, and Arizona as well. So from any kind of rules and regulations, we oftentimes we hear about this in the news, and I usually don't use the news as a resource for actually doing the research to see what it actually does mean. So what I do actually is I go into the CDC website and try to read over what the snippets are and then consult my lawyers on all these effects. So we're going to take a look at the CDC requirements specifically just to show you how I actually do some of these research. Okay, so very quick, you always try to get the resources from the official website, which is the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, right? CDC stands for that. And then in there, when you do a search, there is a temporary halt on residential evictions. So this is the document that you need to read. And it's dated September 4th. So this is the link on that item that we talked about before. And it's in order from September 4th to December 31st. So first of all, this thing will be in place. The moratorium will be in place until December 31st until further notice. Now, this to everyone should not be a huge impact because remember, it's basically whichever is the more restrictive to the landlord between the state moratorium and the CDC moratorium. Oftentimes, if you rental is in a blue state, like such as West Coast states, California, Washington, your state eviction moratorium oftentimes more restrictive to the landlord than what the CDC is going to put out. So that trumps over here because at the end of the day, it's the local court who is interpreting the eviction filing and deciding what to do with it. That matters, right? So keep that in mind. So if you're looking at the CDC requirement, however, I personally think ever since it was in effect, it actually somewhat helped us, the landlords, to clarify some of the unclear items before. And then also puts a little burdens on the tenants in terms of proving their difficulties dealing with COVID-19. And as well as the fact that they actually apply for government assistance. So these 2 points are very important in terms of weeding out who is basically try to just freeload, take advantage of the system, and who is actually impacted by coronavirus. So so we're not going to get into the basic of evictions and etc., but let's dive in to cover people who is actually covered by this, who is actually getting impacted on this, right? So very quickly, number one is individual who has used the best effort to obtain all available government assistance. So now note it, the eviction moratorium is put in place because the government is afraid there's going to be a lot of people who's going to be on the streets, right? So because the unemployment caused by the government restrictive orders on no restaurants, no small business, so a lot of small business got hit. So as you can imagine, people cannot pay their rent, then they will be end up on the streets. So that's something that nobody actually wants to happen because it cause instability on the society, right? So landlords, if you just kind of talked about your tenants having some a little bit compassion, because nobody wants to go through hardships and all of a sudden be on the street. So that's kind of what this moratorium is really helping. The individuals who has used the best effort to obtain all available government assistance is a big one, because prior to this, I think in March, when the corona first hit, the government basically put in a quick band-aid, basically banned all evictions on HUD-backed loans, right? Which means Fannie, Freddie, and HUD, and that's like more than half the volume in terms of multifamily funding. And then Fannie and Freddie, obviously on residential side, 4 units or smaller, that's pretty much like 80-90% of coverage over these mortgages, right? So if you can't evict your tenants and your tenants not paying, that hurts your business tremendously when it comes down to basically owning a property, owning a rental property. So how do you actually combat this? So government has actually given out a lot of assistance to the tenants, including unemployment paycheck. Some people are actually getting more unemployment paychecks, the extra one. Some states are $600 per week more. Some states have $800 per week more. So some people are actually getting paid more than if they went to a minimum paid job, right? So that kind of helped these tenants who were truly impacted by Corona. Now, when that first moratorium came out, that basically held back the loan cannot evict until August 25th or so. So that really hurt the landlords because it basically says you can't evict anyone, regardless of whether they're impacted by Corona or not. So does everybody just kind of get a free tickets and free notice? And keep in mind, like free rent for everyone's obviously great, but there's also the landlord who worked really hard owning a small business. You kind of like essentially hitting these people with their life savings, right? So how do you actually balance this? And this is coming down to government assistance coming in and helping with that. So we noticed when that HUD loan moratorium was put in place, well, a few tenants, not many. We're glad our tenants are really working with us through this. And right away, we send out the assistant list in terms of how they can find help. And then we also inform them on employment benefits and all that stuff the government had available for help. So we helped a lot of our tenants getting into a much better stable conditions other than paying their rents because they also needed money to eat and etc. Right? So it actually strengthens our tenant landlord relationships because we were proactive and tried to help them. But there's always a few bad apples that is not impacted by coronavirus. So they're not applying for government assistance because they can't get any, and they just decided not to pay. Now, that's very few people on our hands, but every property, there's a few of them. So that causes a collection issue. So, and then these are individuals who are really try to take advantage of the system over here, right? So the number one rule over here that we kind of highlight over here, the individual has to use best effort to seek assistance. This is actually great to help landlords because now you're kind of forcing the tenants to make sure that they actually did apply for these assistance. It helped a lot in terms of these tenants that are just not legit in terms of doing the COVID-19. They're not really impacted by COVID. And number two is not going to be a huge effect because some of the state moratorium may be a little bit more restrictive over here, so it can be interpreted the other way. So I'm not going to be paying too much attention to number two, but basically they cannot make more than $99,000 individually or $198,000 individually. Usually if you're in a B and C class tenants, they're not going to make it that much annually. So this usually covers our tenants if it's in the apartment buildings. Now, if you have A-class buildings, then this may be a slightly different story. But again, your local law may trump over this one. The third one is the individual is unable to pay the full rent or make a full housing payment due to substantial loss. So this is basically, this clause is saying that you are in fact coronavirus impacted. So it's due to loss of jobs or due to the fact that you actually have the disease, that you lost a job, or your income got substantially reduced, that you can't actually make the payments, right? So again, I think what CDC is, I like about this is making it more clear who is actually qualifying for this. And number four is individuals use best effort to make timely partial payments. So this is basically saying you don't just get free rent. You are actually on the hook to pay for your rent, even though you are going through the hardships right now. So make partial payments, make whatever that you can pay. And when this moratorium is lifted, the eviction still would be upon it. Like, so we did a lot of discussion with our tenants even before this moratorium is down. Like, hey, you gotta understand the impact of not paying. So all these eviction moratorium can be in place, but at the end of the day, like it's not really worth it to kind of sit this out, try to get free rent because you're gonna have a eviction on your record. right? And then what are you going to do next? You have to plan ahead in your life on all these events. So we work with them on partial payments and etc. Because just know that the landlord doesn't really want to go through eviction, the tenant doesn't really want to go through eviction. At the end of the day, it comes down to a payment issue. So if we can be a little bit more linear, and then making sure there's no rent increases, and being sensitive to our tenants, then oftentimes we see a better results in terms of receiving partial payments. And then the last one is eviction would likely render the individual homeless. This one's going to be hard to determine, right? Which is also, the income requirements above here. I think both number 2 and 3 is try to make sure people are not going to be like, essentially homeless and getting into a congregated sharing space. So so that is basically the gist of who is applicable. Now, how do you actually apply this, right? As tenant, there is a declaration form. It's a form that you basically have to sign, but not only you have to sign, everybody in the household that is adult has to sign, right? In order to kind of prevent evictions and etc. But not only that, you should also prepare for proof that you have actually applied for government assistance, and you're truly corona impacted. So number 1 and 3 is kind of big in terms of helping the landlords as well as helping the tenants to make sure that they're doing the right thing to prevent being evicted. So fast forward, looking at some other parts of this requirement, what is additional things that's important? I'm kind of weed this out to be eviction for reasons other than paying no full rent. Another clause that this is covering is basically saying that if you are getting evicted for other clauses, they're still fully applied, right? So like the eviction moratorium from the COVID-19 from CDC does not just get you a get out of jail free card in case if you're just being a bad tenant and you're not honoring the leases that you have signed with your landlord, right? Because things like engaging in criminal activities, that should not happen anyways. Like if you did harm to other people, you can still continue evicting these people who have done criminal activities on the premises and harming other people. So number 2 is talking about harming other people, threaten the health and safety of other residents. Of course, this excludes people who has COVID-19. Like you can't just say, oh, the person has COVID-19, therefore is creating a threat to the health and safety for other residents. That doesn't work, right? So this is mostly talking about people being violent and this and that, just the normal common decency as a tenant. And the damage of posing an immediate significant risk to the property, same thing. Violating any applicable building codes, health code, violating any other controllable obligation. So all this is just saying, hey, be a decent tenant, like don't do things that's illegal. So if you did that, you can still be evicted, which has nothing to do with coronavirus, which I feel like grateful that they actually defined this, because this is basically allowing landlord, because oftentimes these people who are taking advantage of the systems are also people who's potentially vocal and harming other people. So then you can kind of get these residents out there because they are really posing harm for your whole community. So we can continue doing that to make sure that we eliminate problems over here. So that's kind of helpful. And in addition, now, what is the penalty of this if you if the landlord ignore the rule, which as landlord you should always be up to snuff with the local or the federal legal requirements, because it's your job as a business owner making sure your business is legit, is legal, right? So I think many landlords are small business owner, so the ignorance is not an excuse for not being brushed up on these legal rules. So basically a landlord as an individual, you can get fined up to 200K per person. per incidence for violation for this. After I kind of read through this whole snippets over here, 200K per event if you're individual, and possibly risking in jail when you're in jail. Right, so you don't want to do that. And if it results in death, or 500 per event. So it depends on severeness of this. You could be fined as an individual 100K to 200K, and as a organization, which is LLC, if you hold the property in LLC, then it can be happening up to 500K in case it results in death of another person. Now, if it results into death or other items, then you'd be looking at way more than just 500K, because that's liability that you have responsible for your tenants as well. So that's basically it. Hopefully this helps you clarify what that CDC moratorium is and what you're expecting your tenant to give you, and protect yourself as a landlord in case the tenants wants just to kind of take advantage of this, right? So hopefully this is very clear to you. Just to kind of sum it up, what the CDC, what we have observed in the past 1 month is actually clarified a lot of these kind of like tenants that are just not paying, for no reason at all. They're just not paying. Not a lot of these, but a few folks. So that actually what we noticed is it basically forced a few of these tenants apply for assistance, because this is one of the requirement. You have to provide proof that you actually apply for assistance. That actually eliminated 99% of our tenants who are not paying, who qualify. Because once you apply for government assistance, unless if you're getting a huge amount of checks in unemployment, in which case you should be able to pay anyways, you're getting that assistance, right? So I think that is a big thing. So if you're a tenant, definitely look into these assistance, get on it, like that's going to help you a lot more. And then the second part that we noticed, if people who are just try to freeload, then they also decided to just skip. There's a few skips that we have. And one in addition is that, more assistance was given to us because tenant has applied for them. And it made that dialogue between the tenants and us a lot more open. So we can give them the resources. Before, they maybe not taking it seriously, but now they do, because they have to show proof that they are actually COVID-19 impacted, right? So making our communication a lot more clear with the tenants, and then them more willing to working with us to get this all caught up, which at the end of the day is actually better for the tenants, because they're able to keep their housings over their head, and having this whole 4 months to kind of work out issues and partial payments. And some of the business are reopening up, so that's also giving them just kind of a little bit of buffer time to get onto their feet. And moving forward, we would probably continue for these selected tenants to do partial payments and etc. to help them to kind of catch up as well. Because this whole event is not just something that happened to all of us, right? So I think we all have to have a little bit more compassion to kind of work it through with our tenants. That's it today for RE advice, and hopefully that you have debunked the whole CDC moratorium over here, and hopefully this information is helpful for you to run your small business in rental. All right, we'll talk to you next time.